The Time Agency. Sample Story 2. The Olive Grove Excursion. The Time Agency sphere appeared from the black void that opened. It hovered behind a building. Then, the ramp lowered. Out of the sphere came a man in a black suit, and black tie, and a black waistcoat, and a black hat. He is followed by a woman in a nice, but not overly elegant, dress. Something that is worn for a casual night out when one still wants to dress well. The dress is green with red highlights. She wears a scarf on her head, covering her hair. The man is short and slight in build, with black hair and black eyes, and pale white skin. And the woman has red hair and green eyes, and a reddish tone to her skin. The man is S.K. Walker, and the woman is Anne Jill Sherford. The two hear a voice over a communication system in their clothing. Let's go over this one more time to be sure we all have it right, shall we? There were ripples in history because of other time travel, so this is a simple repair mission. A man named Robert Warden was supposed to meet a woman named Rebecca Straight. They dated, fell in love, and eventually got married and had children and a lovely domestic life together and all that. But due to those pesky ripples, things changed and their meeting never occurred. So you two must arrange a meeting between the two. S.K. replied, We know, Controller. We already went over this twice before and just discussed it in the sphere. We've been on retaining wall duty before. The Controller retorted, Well, I need to make very sure you don't wander off and forget the objective here. You may get distracted or wander off. S.K. said, rather irritatedly, We have never just wandered off on a mission. The Controller said, in curt reply, And Jill did, that one time, when time was shredding. S.K. replied, She didn't wander off. She handled the problem in her own way, and it worked. And she had a perfectly valid reason. And Jill tilted her head to look at S.K. in her usual flat expression, but perhaps a bit softer than usual. The Controller said then, Still, I want this to work, so let's play matchmaker. S.K. looked at Aunt Jill and said, Well, I already devised the plan, so this should be simple. Aunt Jill replied, Time travel is never simple, and I still find the plan to be needlessly complicated by uncontrollable variables. Any one thing can topple this plan of yours. S.K. said, It'll work, and really, it is the best plan, but let's go in. The two began to walk, and it turns out that they were behind a warehouse closed for the night. The sphere returned to the black void it emerged from, awaiting them. S.K. said, Remember where we parked. We'll need to come back. And Jill began a skip-dance walk as they emerged from behind the warehouse and began to walk down the sidewalk toward the olive grove in the near distance. S.K. Walker held the door for Anne Jill Sherford. They stepped in from the cool fall evening of 1989 into the warmer, garlic-scented air of the olive grove. Amber lights cast a friendly glow over wooden beams and green tablecloths. The low murmur of conversations mixed with the clink of silverware and the occasional laugh from a nearby table. The hostess greeted them with a warm smile. Good evening. A table for two. Yes, please, S.K. said. Something near the middle of the room would suit us very well. We enjoy taking in the atmosphere. The hostess offered a booth, but SK politely declined. A table gives us better view across the dining room. We prefer that tonight. She led them to a center table with a clear line of sight. SK sat with unhurried ease, and Jill took a seat opposite him, her posture formal without stiffness. She placed her hands lightly in her lap, folded, one on top of the other, every inch the composed dinner companion. Once the hostess moved away, and Jill spoke in her flat, even tone. This is a great deal of arrangement for a simple thing. A hostess with a tray, or a door that chimes at the wrong moment, or someone glancing up because a glass fell somewhere across the room. All of this could occur, and it would take almost nothing to knock the whole sequence out of place. It's still the best plan for our situation, SK said as he opened his menu but scanned it lightly. There are a great many people in this room. I do not enjoy depending on a crowd behaving exactly as we require of them, said Jill pointedly. They only need to behave like themselves, SK replied warmly. That part I trust completely. Jill said nothing for a long moment. She kept her menu open for the sake of appearances. Their cover remained simple. A couple enjoying an evening out. In this, there was nothing remarkable. Her presence gave him a reason to sit here for an extended period of time, without drawing attention. She served as the believable half of the pair, so long as no one paid too much attention to her cold demeanor. But who paid attention to other tables in a restaurant that intently? The hostess arrived promptly. SK ordered a lemonade, and Jill requested a glass of the house red wine. They sipped their drinks slowly once they arrived, playing their roles with quiet patience. In their internal communications, embedded within their clothing and projected directly inside their bodies, the controller's voice sounded clearly for both of them. No external noise escaped. Darlings, this place is charming. Bring me back something. Be prepared. I'll tell you exactly when. SK showed no outward sign beyond a brief stillness. Jill noticed it at once. Jill spoke then. You are oversure, perhaps. This entire scheme is still one in which too many variables are in play, and any deviation from what is expected will result in failure. SK replied, I'm not as bad as you make me out to be here. I just realize that of our options, this one is the best. Jill replied, if this is our best option, then I would hate to see what is the worst. She said with a deadpanned tone matched by her emotionless expression. SK said, let's not be so pessimistic. It's not that bad. Jill said, we are in a crowded restaurant. Crowds bring with them variables that we cannot account for and cannot control. SK said, if that's all you're worried about, then you need to realize that we don't need to control everything or account for everything. And there is such a thing as predictable group dynamics. You can predict with reasonable certainty how crowds behave and how people react in large groups. Jill retorted, in her cold deadpan, you forget that this is not about predicting general behaviors, but about getting specific results from specific people, and your entire scheme relies on perfect timing and on nothing interfering. If anything happens that you did not anticipate and already correct for, then the complexity of the operation will strike down your confidence and along with it our objectives. The hostess showed up to break up the talk. The restaurant hummed around them. Servers carried trays of pasta and fresh breadsticks. Diners settled into their evenings. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary on a Friday night in the fall of 1989. as the hostess walked away. As the hostess walked away, Angel set her wineglass down with precise care. You are relying on all of the components to simply obey an arrangement that we have made for them when they are not obligated to, and do not even know of our need for such. SK set his lemonade glass down slowly on the tablecloth, and said, I am aware of the variables. Angel continued her objections, saying, if this plan fails, then the plan will not fail because of what you do. It will fail because of what you did not and could not predict. SK nodded once, acknowledging the point without conceding it. I cannot predict everything, but I don't need to. I need to understand how crowds move. People flow around obstacles. They pause at predictable distances. They do not wish to collide with strangers. The room will cooperate without knowing it is cooperating. That's not luck. That's a pattern. Angel's expression did not shift. Her hands remained folded in her lap, one on top of the other, perfectly still. Patterns are averages. Averages are not guarantees. You are placing your confidence in what usually happens. We both know what happens when events are unusual. She paused, just long enough for the weight of that to settle. The one thing you did not account for is what could undo all of the elaborate calculus in your plan. SK held her gaze. His warmth did not falter, but something quieter moved beneath it. I know what chance can do. I've seen it. But if I let the possibility of disaster stop me from acting, I would never act at all. Every mission is a gamble. The only question is whether you place your bet on people being themselves or on everything going wrong. He picked up his glass again. A slow, thoughtful rotation. Angel considered this. She glared, not menacingly, but with the same steady, unwavering expression, but one of resolve, showing her trepidation, rooted in her logic. There is a reason why it is unwise to stake too much on a game of chance, she said, in her usual unemotional manner, a cadence very familiar to SK. SK said, games of chance, however, are really just games of fixed probability, and one can predict outcomes, especially if it is something like poker or a card game. And it's not all risk entered blindly, and if one knows what one is doing, one can often win. Angel said, often is not always, and there is always a chance that one loses, unless one has a way to cheat, or else has omniscience. SK said, you say we could lose if we gamble, but if we don't play the game, then we can't win. And this is not a game of chance. It's only comparable to one due to the chance involved. Here, though, we aren't playing against people who have a vested interest in us losing so that they will win. We have only a room full of people enjoying their evening. They aren't competing against us, and they have nothing to gain if we fail. They aren't trying to stop us. Angel said, the people here do not know why we are really here either, and have no reason to think getting up at a given time hinders any grand plan that you have. SK said, so what do you suggest that we do instead? We have to do something, and my plan is the best something that we have. Angel said, your plan comes with a variety of variables and is a much too complicated scenario to guarantee, which is my point. SK said, but you have not answered my question. What would your plan be for our mission? Angel looked at SK, a glare that he was accustomed to that she gave when annoyed. She was not an emotional sort, but she had her moments of irritation. The silence was, however, rather appealing to SK. As if he waited just a few seconds more, SK could call her out for having no alternative suggestion, mooting the whole talk. Angel, however, was saved by a hostess, for at just the right moment, the hostess came back and said, "Are you two ready to order?" SK said, "I know that I only drank half of it, but would you be a dear and refill my lemonade? And bring one for my date, too." SK looked over at a now more settled but still glaring, though glaring less intensely, Angel. Her now empty wineglass would now not be refilled. They'd share a lemonade instead, a drink now symbolic of an unspoken minor victory being claimed by SK as some sort of philosophical flag marking a victory. Angel did not like his flag planted on her hill, but who did? SK allowed a small, quiet smile. It reached his eyes, but did not disturb his composure. "Then we wait, and tonight, or tomorrow, or the night after, we will have this same conversation again." He raised his lemonade in a faint, ironic toast. "That is the job, is it not? Placing bets on a universe that will not show us its cards." Angel did not return the toast. She glanced at her now empty wineglass and returned her hands to her lap, patient and watchful. At 6:15, the door chimed. A man in his late 20s entered. He was ordinary in every visible detail. The hostess seated him near the center of the room. He placed his order quickly, then stood and headed down a corridor toward the restrooms. "The first half of our erstwhile pair has made his entrance into our grand drama, lovies. Be prepared for action," said the controller wryly. Angel remained patient, with her usual emotionless expression. She watched SK more than the room itself. To any observer, she looked like a woman simply enjoying her date, other than perhaps her coldness. But SK's more outgoing persona managed to somehow make it work in an odd couple sort of way. The controller's voice returned inside of them, confident and certain. "Bob's exiting the corridor. Rebecca is approaching the door. Move now, SK. This is your precise window." Angel spoke one final cautionary note, saying, "Be careful and be precise. One small thing out of place, and there is no second window. You are placing a great deal of weight on a room full of moving parts you cannot control." "Then it is fortunate," SK said whilst rising, "that I am not asking the room to do anything." He straightened his jacket and said, "I'll be back in a moment." Angel gave the smallest nod of acknowledgement as SK began to walk away, though he did give a slight smile to her before he turned his back to her to walk away. SK reached the corridor just as Bob stepped out. He fell into step beside him for 2 paces, and then eased gently into his path. "I'm sorry to trouble you," SK said, sounding genuinely apologetic, "but I seem to have left my watch at home. Would you happen to have the time?" Bob stopped and checked his wristwatch and smiled. "Sure. Just 6:15. "Thank you," replied SK, and gracefully gave a slight nod and turned and walked away. The entire exchange lasted perhaps a few seconds. SK stepped aside, and Bob continued on his way. At that exact moment, as SK asked the question, the restaurant door chimed again, and a young woman stepped inside. She clutched her coat and handbag tightly, her eyes scanning the room with clear uncertainty. The hostess guided her to a waiting area near the hostess stand, as no table was immediately ready. Bob arrived back at the tables just as Rebecca was being directed to wait. Their eyes met unexpectedly as she turned from the hostess. "Oh, sorry," Rebecca said, a little embarrassed. "Not at all," Bob replied. He paused instead of moving on. "I'm Bob," she said. "Rebecca." Bob then said, "So, you look a bit dazed." Rebecca said, "I am lost, actually. I just moved to town and... Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know why I'm bothering you with this." Bob smiled and said, "I'm not bothered. Tell me more." Rebecca said, "Well, I just moved to town for a new job and spent the whole day looking for an office building where I'm supposed to start work on Monday. But I couldn't even find the place. The city's layout is confusing, and I can't keep it all straight." Bob said, "Yeah, it is confusing, especially if you're new here. But I've lived here for a while, and I can help you, if you want help. You could join me at my table, and I could give you directions." Rebecca smiled and said, "That'd be great. I hate eating alone anyway, but I don't know anyone in the city, and I don't really have any friends here." Bob smiled and said, "Well, I won't presume on your friendship, maybe. You'll hate me, but you do at least know someone now, and that's a start." Rebecca laughed at this, and they sat at his table. Bob ordered another menu for his new dinner companion as they began to talk. Back at the corner table, SK settled into his seat once more, and Jill had kept her posture composed throughout. She watched as Bob pulled his chair over to where Rebecca stood waiting. The two began speaking with growing ease. Her expression revealed nothing. The controller's voice sounded one final time. "Well, those two are at it, and tonight is a success. Tomorrow, Bob shows Rebecca her office building, then around town, and next week they go out as friends, which turns into date night. And yes, they do indeed get married and have 4 children. It seems our task is complete. Good work, darlings." "It worked," SK told Aunt Jill quietly. She sipped her lemonade and said nothing. She did not raise the matter again. The plan had worked, and whatever doubts she had carried to the table, she set them down now with the same quiet efficiency that she carried everything else. "Your concerns were fair," SK said after a moment. "Every one of them. This room is full of things neither of us could account for. But it was still better this way. A small surgical move, unnoticed. In the future, those two may not even remember me. And if they do, I'm just the random man who happened to coincidentally delay Bob enough to meet Rebecca. But you were right that there were risks. But in life, there are always risks. And we can't just sit and wait until conditions perfectly align to make our task easier, as that seldom happens in life. You weren't wrong, though. Anything could have happened to derail the situation. But I had to take the risk, because the odds were still better that I'd make it work. And besides, it's still better than more direct action. I hope you understand. Besides, your caution does keep me from becoming too reckless or overconfident." He turned his glass slowly on the tablecloth. "The less we touch, the less there is to go wrong, and the less there is for anyone to remember, and the less that we interfere with." And Jill considered that. "Thank you. The risk was real. But risk, I suppose, comes with what we are. And I suppose the complexity of humanity and the unpredictability of crowds is not enough to delay what must be done." SK smiled warmly at her and said, "Sometimes it is. But sometimes there is that child running into you, or that accidental bump from a stranger that delays you just long enough to matter. But that's how life is in general, and we can't function if we always concern ourselves with all that could go wrong, and never act until there is no chance of failure. Or else we will paradoxically always fail. Trying to assure success often guarantees failure instead. SK adjusted himself in his chair and fixed his own gaze upon Angil's face intently, continuing, "In 20 years they may not even remember that funny little man who asked Bob the time tonight at all. Or if they do, it will be as some daft coincidence. A man who asked the time, a woman who happened through the door at a moment later. Nothing more than that. It is a good deal cleaner than trying to orchestrate things. Sometimes all that is needed is a gentle nudge." Angel considered this as she turned her own glass slowly, thoughtfully rather than resistant. "It is." The restaurant continued its steady rhythm. No one paid special attention to the center table or to the new pair sitting in their own corner table. Outside, the autumn night pressed against the windows. Inside, the olive grove felt warm and timeless in its relatable way. "I am hungry now," Angel said. The hostess returned. With the mission complete, they decided to stay and eat properly. SK chose the minestrone soup and a house salad for them both to share. Angel took the opportunity to order a second glass of the house red wine, along with it, a rebalancing of things, as it were. SK, once his lemonade ran low, asked for another. As they waited for the food, SK glanced toward Bob and Rebecca, seated now at a small table nearby. Leaning in slightly, the first threads of conversation forming easily between them. Angel watched a moment longer than she needed to, then returned to her meal, satisfied in her own quiet way that things had indeed worked out. Outside, the 1989 autumn night continued. Inside, the two-time agents settled in for the rest of their meal, already preparing to bring something back for the controller as requested. The evening stretched ahead, normally and unremarkably to everyone else. The end.